Good morning. Time to do some development. I well, what happened since last stream? We fixed. I worked on that curl pipe thing that I merged, and a few other things happened also. I mentioned during the last stream that we had this. Someone, my Stack Overflow post was removed and it got back and it was commented a lot. So yeah, it was a lot of fun with that. It seems that Stack Overflow post is back, but it's now locked. Okay, and then yesterday, or I think late the night before, someone mentioned this stream on Reddit, and suddenly I got a lot of more followers on Twitch, which I mean, that's fun. And they by default it's set up so that they email me once for every new follower you have on the Twitch channel, which was fun because I wasn't at my computer until the afternoon yesterday. It was a day off, May 1st. So I got almost, I think, nearly 800 emails before I managed to turn off that feature in on my account on Twitch. So that was good fun. But okay, today I wanted to dive into this little bug. I actually already started on it before. Hang on a second here. I have my browser app. Where's my browser? So I was working on the bug is actually it is called, right, because I renamed it. It's called URL parser regression, and I started. Actually, if we dig into the details, the problem is that previously you could do like this. Here's an example of a previously working command line that the user did manage to use then, and here's the interesting part. It uses the IPv6 numerical address within brackets as it's supposed to be, and here's the key here that it's the interesting part. That's a scope ID for the IPv6 address. And I broke this along the way. It's actually been broken for a while now, and the funny part is that we've partly fixed it several times, and now we're back again. So we can say here it used to work back in 760 days, and now in 764, which is the latest one, then it doesn't work. And there are many parts to this issue. First and primary thing is that this is not the correct syntax according to URL standard. It's supposed to be a URL encoded percentage, which happens to be %25 and not just percent. But still, since we supported it back then, we should support it now as well, so that we don't introduce, since we should be compatible. So yeah, that's fun. And I started working on this, and I have a pull request already, I think. Here it is. So there are several little details when it comes to this bug. First, we have a URL parsing API now that we didn't have before, and that is exposed in the API and it's used internally. And when using this, you extract a host name from the URL. So then the question, of course, becomes, is the scope ID part of the host name or isn't it? And I think part of the reason now why it doesn't work is that right now, then when the bug is here, it is returned as part of the host name, which confuses everything because It's not really. It's not part of the IP. It's the scope of the IP address. It's not the actual IP address. So now this new approach, I'm going to cut it off from the host name so that the IP address becomes usable again. And that seems to work. And I pushed it here, and then Jay came along and provided excellent feedback. And that is basically what I'm going to work on now. So since if you're looking here, you just can see this now. According to this RFC then 6874, which I believe is the one I read, the zone ID then is supposed to be written like this. As you can see here, it's the IPv6 address. I can zoom it so that there's no question about it. So it's the address %25 zone ID. It's very clear that it should be %25. But okay, so if I want to support just percent because we did it in the past, and we support just percent because that is what a lot of people are just using because they think it works like that, because you can do it. For example, you can use that with ping. Ping doesn't work with URLs, but it works with single percentage like this, so people will use it, and I think that's why we added support for it back in the day. I don't actually remember why we started to support it, but we do, or rather we did. So I want to bring that feature back. But okay, and then Jay pointed out that the way I did it. Let me show you the way I did it. No, curl doesn't support ICMP, but then again, there's no URLs syntax for ICMP anyway. So, and it wouldn't make sense. There's no file transfers in ICMP, so that wouldn't make sense. But I just wanted to show you that when I solved this, let me just make sure that I actually have it checked out. It's in the bag there, parse IPv6 scope ID. I have so many branches, so I sort of get lost. And I'll sure, you can do whatever, but that's not regular ICMP. That's a fun game on top of it. I'll rebase and I'll just squash my silly attempts here to make it a single patch so far. It looks like this, 54 lines, blah blah blah, and I updated the tests to make sure that the tests actually work the same way that I do. But okay, I'm going to update it because I did it like this. Here's the host name check that now. This is the function that parses the host name and extracts the scope ID if there's a percentage sign in there, percent sign. And here I took some freedoms that I decided that the scope ID could never be more than 15 bytes. I'm not sure that is correct, but I went with that anyway. I can always update it later. And if there's a 25 first after the percent, I just skip it because it's part of the separator, right? So you could do only percent or %25 and then get the rest of the scope. But that turned out to be a stupid assumption, or a wrong assumption from my part, because on Windows the scope ID can be exactly 25. So I wouldn't know if it's a bad separator or if it's actually the the bad separator with a correct scope, or the right separator with the scope following. It's a bit complicated, but still, that's why Jace suggested that we would check if 25 happens to be the only. When thinking about it, it's not going to work either, right? Because what if we have an identifier scope ID that starts with 25 and like 252? So I'm not sure I can be that liberal to actually only accept the percent thing. This is going to be painful. But possibly in Windows 7 the zone identifiers I see are numeric. So possibly they don't have that large numbers. That's sort of a game, of course. I mean, I'm putting my money on that is the case, but also we don't. Yeah, I think I'm going with Jay's approach there, just because it should make what we know exists work at least. So if 25 is present and the URL is an I'm going here with Jay's suggested solution. Jay being one of our contributors and maintainers since a long time. Smart dude. So wait, I don't need to do this. If it's 25, we know that it's not. It could be a 0, but we can just do it like this. And oh, right, we don't want to pass the 0. That's why we want to do it. So yes, if it's percent and then it's a 25 and there's not a 0 after the 25 and that sign isn't and brackets, so we know that there's something else coming after the 25, then we skip it. Otherwise we leave it, and then we include it in the scope. And then he added another little thing here. Yes, if there's no scope length at all. So if wait a minute, why does he do he added a condition like this? I'll add it first. If it's 1 or less. What's wrong with 1? I think I should rather have it if it's 0, so it never actually got any bytes into the scope ID. That's wrong. So I'm going to add a test for a 0 length scope, and I'm going to add a test for the Windows style scope. And first I'm going to make sure that it actually builds still. It does, I think. Yep. Okay, back to that, and the test case. I have this little alias that just shows. I have library test cases and unit test cases, so I can go with the lib test case. I think that's the better of these test cases. It's a pretty advanced test case because it has a bunch of different sets of tests within this file. It has a parts list which tells curl to parse a URL and extracts all the different parts that curl supports to extract, and it has different lists for different kind of tests. So I can just see that, yeah, I did. There's a test. This is a Windows, an example of wait a minute. That's not a good. Thinking again on this condition. If it's a 25 there, and there's a sign. Oh, right. So if it's just a 25. if it's a 25 only, then if it's nothing else than %25, then that 25 is supposed to be the scope. But otherwise, it's the separator. Okay. So the test here, I have some other, here are some other, here's a URI parse test then that it uses. First it uses the, here it parses this URL and then it normalizes it, and we ask for it to get the URL back again, and then so then we get it normalized and fixed, and then we see that in the correct sort of encoded URL it does %25. So if you pass in a bad URL like this, curl will accept it, and when you ask for the URL back again, it will have fixed it like that. So yeah, we can, for example, then, oh, this is fun. So if we add, in this case, we make it exactly 25, which then means that this is a Windows style scope ID, and when extracting this URL again, it will add 2525, because then it'll add the correct separator and the scope ID. The scope ID being the exact same as the well, at least that's the thought here. Okay, so yeah, I didn't actually change the code. I changed the test, so I'll just rebuild all the tests, because this is my special branch for this. I hadn't built it before. I have a window just above my head here, sort of so I can see the rain falling on it right now. Outside. Okay. 16, no, 1560 is the test case. So I just run that specific test with. And magic, you know, always weird. Did it actually work? Yes, it says it works. So let me just break this and see that it actually fails if I do it the wrong way. So yeah, and if I break the test, yeah, it wanted that one, but it got. So yeah, we can see that it wasn't just me being stupid. It actually did exactly what I wanted it to do. So fun. Oh, and okay, so that's the Windows weirdo case. Wrong syntax with a Windows scope style ID. That's really a bit icky, I'd say. Let's hope no one finds out. Okay, and here's a broken, completely broken URL, since we can't just have a zero length scope ID. So if we do it like this, boom, and then it said got URL in returned 3. Yeah, I think that is the and the return codes, I can never remember them by. Right, it returns a malformed input, which seems correct, right? Because it was wrong. Wasn't it? I think so I have a struct for the different expected things. So this is a fairly complicated test case. It's almost 900 lines of code just to test these different cases, but it's pretty good. It's pretty covering of most, but apparently not good enough then, since they found out this problem and reported a bug on it. So yeah, there are many edge cases when it comes to URL parsing. So yeah, now it detects that it's bad and it returns malformed input when there's no scope ID at all, just a percent sign there. So, what else did Jay provide in his feedback? Yeah, he asked some questions. So, yep. Ooh, right. Now I thought of another problem. And he mentioned here, shouldn't existing scope ID be freed? So, yeah. Wait a minute. Let me just first I'll commit this, and I'll fix up handle Windows style scope ID with wrong scope separator. I'll fix up that better in the end, but now okay. The other case is like this. We or I parse the scope ID. Here it is. The scope ID can be 15 bytes long, and it strudups it, so it saves it separately from the host name. And right now, we have the URL API that was new. That was when I broke this functionality, by the way, when I introduced the URL parsing API to the libcurl public API. And so I provided the API, and then you can extract all these different parts from the API. You can set them and you can extract them. All these different parts. Well, the URL is the complete one, and then there are different parts. And if you take a closer look at the list of parts here, there's no part named scope ID. So when we strip it off from the host name, you can extract the host name, which then is the IPv6 numerical address only, but you can't get the scope ID from even though it was put in the URL. So now we save it in the URL struct. So if you ask for the URL back again, it'll be there, but you can't ask for the sort of the special part from the URL, which is a missing functionality. So I intend to fix that and do it, but that's adding a new part here. So that's changing the API. Well, it's extending the API, and I really don't want to do that while we are in a feature freeze. So my plan is to just not do it now and instead introduce it in the next release. And I mean, not in the one pending now, but in the one coming after the next one. Since right now we're in a bug fix period, bug fix window. No, we don't merge any changes or stuff like that. I mean, changes to functionality changes. So I'll save the scope ID extract ability, but if we parse a URL with a scope ID, and then we use the URL API to set the host again, update the host part, we need to clear the scope ID, because the scope ID is going to be associated with the host. I think it's a little bit of a special situation. I haven't really made up my mind exactly how that is supposed to work, but you can ask for, if you ask curl to parse a URL, here, parse this string blob, and then after you parse the URL, you can update the host name in the URL, which is a fancy feature. But if we can't leave the old scope ID, I think. So I better fix it. When host is set, clear the scope ID. Host. Not get, but set. And here's the host. It sets the host, store host. And Right. It's a bit. And then, of course, when setting a host, you shouldn't set the scope ID in the host because that's not really the host part. So yeah, fun times. When we set the host free, and I'm going to have to add not host, scope. And I'm going to have to add a test case for this. And of course, I think for this I think I need to write it. I mean, this is the test file for all the weird URL parsing things, but I think I need to do a very special test for this. I'll add it on top just now. I could do it. 5.1. Yeah, okay. If scope ID return 6. And I'll make it a separate one here. Static int scope ID. So here's how you use the with the URL API. You create a handle with curl URL, and with that handle you can ask it to parse, for example, URL. And in our case, we will parse something like this. Boom. I want it to be a IPv6 numerical address with a scope ID. Port, no, we can have the port. We can skip the port and do hello.html. Just a sort of typical style URL. And okay, so we parse it with a scope ID, and this is supposed to RC. So this should just work. Fail unless RC. So it should just work. Or maybe you should just do it like this. If RC isn't. Okay, here's a skeleton for this, so I'm running make in the wrong directory. Bad idea. Running make in the right directory. So okay, it should return okay because it's a proper URL, and when it has parsed that URL, we will. I called it, yeah, because it's not called like that. Code. It's curl u code. That's the return type these functions return. So okay, when it parses the URL, and after it parsed the URL, we update the host name here in the URL because why not? So we parse that URL and we update the host name to be a very exciting example.com. curl upart host and no flags. So we just ask it to, instead of using the original hostname, we just update it to be example.com instead. And we check that it returns OK, otherwise set part host returned. So we updated the host name, and sure, that should work. And when we've updated the host name, we ask for the new URL back, updated with the host. So then we ask for the URL, the full URL, and we ask it like this, and no extra flags. And we should have a variable for that, and that should also work. If it didn't, we fail, and if it worked, if print, we can just what do we do? We can just we got, I'll just output it first and see that it actually, and then we can then we rather should clean up the URL parser handle there. So if we do like this, it doesn't really care. We forgot to, I forgot to no, look, yeah, that's a good test, or rather that we, I see here that I've forgotten to, that this is a memory leak. So and we can see that it's the scope ID test that leaks it, because I don't free the URL. Yeah, that was stupid. So it's supposed to be curl free of the URL that we got back, if it didn't fail, because if it failed, so let's just do an else there, and then it should work. But now we I'll just fire up the actual we got. So here we can see the extracted URL. I parsed that URL, I updated the hostname part, I extracted the full URL again then with the updated hostname part. So it replaced the hostname with a new one, and it got the full one back. But it might be more fun if we do that, and then we update the hostname part again. And this time we update it with a, I changed the other order. So when we have a scope ID, I wanted to set, what if we set the hostname part to IPv6 localhost, like that. And then I extract it and look at it, and then I set it again to example.com, and then we extract that and look at it. There. Boop. Yeps. That works nicely. Yeah. That's cool. What did I forget now then? What if I try to update to hostname using a scope ID? Since I just concluded that the hostname doesn't read, it's not really clear if it does or not, but I don't think it belongs to the host name. It's more like a separate thing, but I'm not sure everyone will agree with that. So okay, paste. So if we set the host name, what will it do? Set the host name with a scope ID. Okay, so did it work? What happened? It worked. It worked all right. But I'm not sure it was really intended to work. Yes, it is, because it's the host name parser. But okay, I'll do it. This is fun. So if I set, so I set the URL. Oh no, sorry, I set the host part like this. What happens if I extract the host part again? I think then I'll only get I'll get it without the scope ID, I think. So I'm going to extract only the host part from the URL. Host, yeah, okay, the variable is called URL here as well, but yeah, that's fine. Just, it's a test case. It's just a test case. Then we got it with the scope ID. That's not really consistent, right? So if I try this, immediately after I parsed the first host, no, I parsed the full URL up here, parse this one, what happens when I extract host from that? I think it'll just, it should skip the host, the scope, right? In the first case, we get it without the scope ID. In the last case, we don't. So I think I need to fix that. I also need to, these outputs that I'm doing here, I need to actually do some programmatic checks. I need to check them. I mean, otherwise it's a pretty bad test case, right? You shouldn't read the output. But okay, since this is wrong, I'll just work on it first. So how do you do, fellow hackers? Yes, good. Here at least. It's okay. I'll get on with here. I'm setting the host part. So in this function, boom, I set the host part. There I free the scope, which is correct. Oh, right. Now I'm thinking the other way around, because I want to show you something other interesting. So in this case, if I'm not sure how well documented this is, but I probably should document it better, because I can also do like this. Oh, that turned out line too long. I mean, just add some junk here. And the junk is in there. Yes. Yeah, that is rather, well, yeah. Okay, but that was a good reminder. I think I need to make sure that it's actually documented like that. Given blah blah blah, set the part to remove the parse contents. Okay. I wonder if this is good or bad. It would also be check hostname check. We could also just parse it with hostname check and reject it if it doesn't. I mean, if it's bad. I think I'm actually going to do that, because why not? In the hostname check, we use it like this. Yeah. So there's a lot of encoding options too, so it's not that easy, because you can pass in a broken string and ask curl to, for example, URL encode it, and then it might actually turn out okay in the end. So if I'm going to parse it and verify that it's fine, I think I'm going to do that, but I need to do that after the potential encoding, the URL encoding, for example. So, fun times. So, okay, I'll put it down here, and I'll need to do it before it actually replaces or maybe like that. If we want to replace the host name, host name, no more Mozilla for me, no. I work for Wolf SSL these days. New P. Oh, host name check. Host flags. What flags? What do we do flags there for? We don't need any flags. No flags. If host name check, if that isn't good, we free new P, because then we can't use it, and then we return curl UE malformed input. Whoa, this is cool. Oh, wrong. Rebuild curl first, and I messed up some. It's a Okie dokie. What happens then? Now it should return error when I set that crazy hostname. And I should make it a little less crazy, but I just want to make sure that it actually first return error on the super crazy hostname, this one. Like this, beep. Excellent. And then so if I set it like this, it should be fine, because now it'll parse it correctly. Yeah, and then we extract. There, I like that. Cool. So so I can 1560 is the test case. The test case format is a little like XML. It's not really XML, but it's almost looks like it. So well, here's a test. It's a very basic test case describing things with a few tags and stuff. But in the end, we can do a like this. We can ask it to verify something. And we can verify standard out, for example. And in my case, I output those. Just because I output those on standard error. Well, I can just change that. So I'll just output these we got things to regular standard out instead, just to keep errors and normal output separate. That's good. We got 5 we got, right? Rerun. Boom. Looks good. So when I oh, I need to then of course rerun it properly with the proper test case invoke thing. And here it invoked then, so it compares, the test script compares that the text on standard out actually is exactly the way we expected it to be. So this list, this is the text we expect on standard out from this test. And it works. Ploop. Pretty nice. And I'm pretty satisfied with how this works right now. Sometimes it's worth it to just run a few other tests to make sure that I didn't break anything terribly bad. And it seems that at least a bunch of random tests are happy. I used this uppercase -R switch to run tests, which makes them run in a random order. Die there. Okay. fun. I just want to make another test. Torture 1560. I bet that'll take a long time. I mentioned it before, but the torture tests, they first run it once and count the number of allocations, and then reruns the test this many times and make sure that each malloc fails once. One each, I mean, so that it'll just run and rerun until all of them have been made to fail once. It's a good way to make sure that we don't have any apparent memory leaks or other crappy exit paths, you know, dangling pointers or stuff like that. But okay. Well, I broke it in the middle, so yeah, I'll leave it like that. And since I already rebased everything, and I'm going to rebase it and squash it again and just make it into one single patch. Strip off scope ID. Strip off scope ID from numerical IP addresses to make them just fix is 3817 and it closes 3822, which happens to be this pull request. Also makes curl URL set syntax check curl u part host. There. And if you're following here and look, I also added a little to-do item here, so I should add a scope ID part for the URL API. So actually you should be able to, for example in this case, update the host part in the URL and then just update the scope ID part separately with another of these arguments. Just for completeness, I don't think a lot of people will miss it or cry in its absence, but still. And we force push back to the PR branch, kadoom, and we switch over to the browser and it looks like this. Where are we? Reload. Force push just now and it'll restart all the CI builds, blah 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 blah. Sometimes I appreciate that a few of these are really fast, so they will show the initial results within a few minutes, and if the initial result is red already within a few minutes, then I can just go back and fix up, because some of these builds like the Appway and the Travis ones, they are, I mean, several hour jobs. And the Python analysis is pretty useless because we don't have any Python. So yeah, good to know that the code we don't have, it's okay. There. Let's go and see what else we have. I have another. When I did my stream Tuesday, I figured out that we had a few too many prototypes left. Burp, and here's the pull request to remove. As you can see here, it's just a removal of a bunch of prototypes in a header file, and it was clean and everything, and all tests or checks actually turned out fine. And why is? And I can see that I'm showing the wrong browser. That was stupid. Sometimes it does like this. The obs thing. that I'm using for the streaming, it actually loses some of the windows. I have a bunch of Firefox windows, of course, on my screen. Actually, on my screens, I actually have 4 of them right now, and one of them is the one I pick to select to show in the stream, and sometimes it picks another, which is annoying, because then you won't see what I thought you were going to see. So here is the pull request I did last night. Yeah, 11 hours ago. That was pretty much last night. So here's what it does. Removes a bunch of prototypes. Beep, 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 beep. That's all it does. Very simple, basic. Nothing controversial. It went green, everything, and I'm back here. So I'm checking out the master, and I'm merging in that pull request branch. And I don't like the commit things, so I'm rebasing it on top of master. I can just mention that it closes 3828 and not an A there. And I'm pushing it to master. Boom. And when I do this branch here, it goes closed. Boom. And I can delete the branch on GitHub. And we're back here, and over in my own local Git tree, since I merged this branch, I remove it, and I have to actually use the capital D because I rebased it and stuff, and I haven't pushed that branch. So some Git jobs, Git work. I have some other things pending, right? Yeah, that's the URL API, and I closed another PR on mine yesterday because we got a better PR from someone else, so the Mesalink work is now fine. Okay, I worked on the parallel transfers a lot. I have more to do there, so I'll just leave it for now. What? So, bug reports done. If we look back on the recent ones, I'm a little bit zoomed in, so let's zoom out. Well, git merge and git rebase, they are really the key commands to use in Git, especially when you're working with pull requests in in someone's repository. They're really useful and handy, and you getting to know those will make you a better developer when using Git. So we have bug reports, and I'm going to start out with this. This is interesting. I think this is actually more of a documentation update because I'm not sure how this is supposed to work. So first I can mark this as related to FTP. So this is a rather esoteric functionality. The curl opt wildcard match is a way for curl to list files from an FTP server according to a wildcard match. I mean, we don't have a lot of wildcard matching in curl, and we have this, and it's only for FTP. It's rarely used, and it's a bit of an oddball, but it's there, and it works. But apparently you can't use well, the file info argument. So I'm going to look at it. I don't remember exactly how it looks. So let's dive into the code. curl lib ftp.c. Here we are. Curl file info. Yeah, and we're curl file info is a public header somewhere. There it is. It's a public struct in the header. So it has a time somewhere. Where's time? There's time. And how do we populate time? There's a wildcard. No, yeah, that's tiny. That doesn't do much. But there's, I remember, and here I'll confess that I didn't write this functionality myself from the beginning, and I have a few gaps in my awareness and knowledge about how this works. So this is a research area for me, genuinely. So time. Parsing time in an ls output. That's really weird. I mean, the top here, it shows how different ways of ls outputs from different servers, and it's really there's no standard. They just mimic basically Unix style directory listings, the listing styles, and you know how when getting this line of data, how do you figure out the time from this? It's a little bit of magic applied here, or guessing and parsing and figuring out. Yeah, that's one of the many areas where FTP is such a fun protocol. But at least it's old. So here we can see that it's actually well, what can we see? You can see it changing state a lot in the parsing. I don't think it ever updates it. If I would go here and I would delete that one, I mean, this is ugly, so I can't do this, but I'll just see what happens. No wonder it's 0, right? It's never even touched by any code at all. How lame. How lame. Yep, it's there, but it's I'm curious then if we ever did that, or if it's just if I broke it along the way or something. But yes, I'm tempted to not work on that, at least not right now. That's wow. But weird. If some of these fields is not null, well, if some of them are not null, it's a pointer to b data. So I wonder if That's a pain in my soul realizing this, because what am I supposed to do now? I don't want to implement the date parser. It's a little bit lame to just document it now when it's bug. If bug is filed, hey, it doesn't work. It never worked. But parse list. I mean, it does parse parts of it at least. So it might not be terribly hard to add support for it, but on the other hand, we've had this functionality for how long? A very long time. What if I now if I log the source file for this, added support for this in May 2010, today May 2019, and now we get a bug report that DIME is not filled in. So it took 9 years for someone to realize that. Then maybe it's not the world's most used feature or world's most missed feature either. I'm going to just see if I can find something about time in, if I just it looks basically the same that I've already seen. Nothing obvious sticks out, that nothing sort of, no big chunk of code was removed that explains why it doesn't work now. So I don't think this ever worked, which right here, like this. Is that function still there? Get time. Here it is, I think. Well, one invoke at least of a get time. There could be possible tape from server, leaving unimplemented for now. So let's see when that was removed. It was removed there. Remove empty function in 2015. Then Yep. Okay, good to know. I'll yap something in the bug report. Okay. It was never actually implemented. The empty date parsing function that was provided in the initial implementation from May 2010 was removed in 2015 in commit. I like throwing around a few commits like this. I'll also just, it was added in this from 2010 commit, boom, and then because then GitHub will change them to links, boom, was committed in. So okay, the functionality has been missing since then, I personally don't have any strong desire to implement this now and would probably prefer to document this as this struct field as always set to 0, which is the truth. It also shows what crappy tests we have for FTP list parsing, since a test would presumably show that this doesn't actually work or exist. Bam. Error out if SSL not found. Yes. Okay, so we have this bug, and this is a long-standing thing, so maybe it's time for me to actually fix this, because this is something that has been annoying users for a very long time. This is basically when you invoke configure and you point it to, for example, an OpenSSL installation in a custom place, you point it to something and it fails. It doesn't find it there. It'll just disable SSL or OpenSSL from the build and just continue. And when you run make later on, it'll build it without SSL support, and you might be surprised and maybe not even notice. So this then complains about this and said that if we run configure with this option and we don't find OpenSSL, maybe we should, or it doesn't actually say maybe, it says we should error out, show up a big fat warning, and I tend to agree. I think I've gone back and forth regarding this over time, which might be the reason why it's still a bit like this. But okay. Warning, it says SSL disabled somewhere there. So yeah, at least you get a big warning message if you build curl without SSL support, because it's actually pretty unusual. So very few users actually want to build curl without SSL. But I want to do then with SSL. There. We have a lot of SSL backends, and it's a bit crazy sometimes. So you can enable SSL builds for, I mean, in a lot of different places. So I want to add a little variable in each of these places that says I want it enabled, and then later down there at the warning, if the user wanted it enabled and yet it wasn't enabled in the end, I'll probably just error out. Instead of making a warning, it should be an error. I think. that would be the complete fix. I can also just chicken out and do more incomplete fix, which would be much easier, which is what the bug reporter proposed. Not sure that is better. So in the case you use yes, or you use this star, which is something, the parameter to the option, you have asked for it. In the off case, you haven't asked for it. It'll check for it anyway. But then we presumably shouldn't warn about it, because then you didn't actually ask for it. Or did you? No, we can't do it like that. So the first default SSL backend, blah 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 blah. Win SSL. Yes, please. So SSL wanted. It's the name of it. Let's call it SSL wanted. Yes. SSL wanted. And then, of course, someone will now explain to me that it's not SSL anymore, it's TLS. But let's ignore that. Let's call it SSL. Where to look for it? Configure hacking, that's a very particular kind of thing. It usually involves a lot of pain, and this CMA's M4 shell script weird mix of logic. So it's yeah. Boom. And not only is configure script fiddling annoying and a bit of strange, this is a configure file then that is basically 20 years old something. So there's a lot of history and a lot of assumptions and different styles through different times and everything. So yeah, it's good times. Yeah, but then you can say, so sure, shouldn't we do something else than configure and auto tools? And then we end up in a completely different world of pain. So there's no way to avoid the world of pain. There's just different worlds of pain. So I rather stick to the world of pain that I'm actually pretty familiar with. So it works actually pretty good in the end. The problem with switching to anything modern is that curl runs on pretty much everything that isn't modern too. So going with something modern makes it very hard for a huge number of users of us. So I'm sticking to the old traditional configure for the foreseeable time, and we have a CMake build option as well. It's not as complete, so I'm not sure I recommend it to anyone, but I know a lot of users are using it, so it works at least to some degree. Usually I end up with users pointing out that something doesn't really work when you build with configure, and it works when you do it with it doesn't really work with CMake, but it works with configure, and that is just because of that, because I've never become really friendly with CMake, so I do everything in configure, so the CMake build is always lagging behind. It is always the lesser of the two in the current project, at least. So that's just how things are. So now I only updated the configure script. So if I just want to see what happens if I run configure and I want to use it with OpenSSL installed here. TMP nowhere real. I mean, nothing. Right, look at that. Because I have. That's now I remember. Well, programming is a lot of that's pretty much programming is programming instructions, right? And that's basically if or else gates. Yes, that's pretty much programming from the beginning. Well, you have to loop too, so if you can do if else and a loop, then you have programming. Then it's just code, and you just have to do it in the right combination, and then you're done. Is bad. So yeah, you can't actually. It actually verifies if you point out a directory. It'll verify that you point out to that some it actually verifies that there seems to be a fine include file in it to make sure that the prefix looks fine. So I'm a little bit surprised. Let me check the bug report again. Look at this. So yeah, in the bug report, he just removed the library and not the include file. And in my test in this configure script, I actually verify that the include file is there, and then I think the prefix is fine. So if I wanted to reproduce his case, I would point out a custom place, keep the okay. I can do it like that. But instead of ruining my own custom build, I have this OpenSSL directory. I actually have a whole bunch of them, as you can see. I have 4 of them. But okay, let me copy that and I put it on in here. TMP OpenSSL. I can boom, and then I do like exactly the way he did it, because he did it like this, and I can remove. Let's see what's in there. Yeah, I can remove everything in there, apart from the directories perhaps, but okay. And then when I want to let's build with my OpenSSL in the TMP directory, and now it'll find the include file, so it'll consider it a fine prefix. But the configure checks that'll check if it can link stuff with OpenSSL. That will fail. Should fail, right? It didn't fail. Aha, right, because that's another. Because now it worked anyway. Because in configure it'll just provide the. Look at this. Because I have a system OpenSSL. So sure, it'll ask, this is the config lib. We will use this. So it'll set up the headers and everything. We will link from this No, that's I'm stupid. So I need to actually well, I think you can figure out what the command line options to curl actually do by either do man curl or read on the web page. I don't think I need to explain to command line options in the stream. They're not very complicated. It struck me that my simple just copy everything didn't really work, because there's a no, it's what it's called. There's an OpenSSL PC here, and it has no, -h is not a header. But if you had used a capital H, it would have been a header. There's a difference between that. So -h is just a help output. Look, -h help. And actually, if you would do that, and you would do grep, and you would do it, and you would find, I say, and I didn't. Because it's, I don't know why. Well, sure I did. I just can't read. Here it is. That's the -u. Okay, so I had to change the prefix so that it'll use the correct one when I run the configure script, because otherwise it pointed out to the previous one. No, I'm not. I mean, that's a regular mistake, right? So it's not that, it's not a stupid mistake. It's just a mistake. So if you go to the web page on curl, you can go to this. I think it's man page. So you can go to man page, and here they all are documented. So -v verbose, and you can use -u, that's the user, and they're fairly detailed, documented with fair amount of details. So I would imagine if that is not good enough, I would recommend going to ec.hacks.se, which is the everything curl book web version, and then you could go to, well, apart from reading, maybe going to the chapter about command line basics. Maybe, since you talked about -v, that's in the verbose chapter, and then you can see what the -v does verbose, and it talks a lot about verbose mode for curl, blah blah blah. Everything curl is pretty detailed, so you can pretty much find whatever you want to know about curl in this little thing. Everything curl is also mentioned on the web page. Actually, if you go to like the get help, there's this book everything curl menu option, which takes you to this. So everything curl is a book about curl, but it's I mean, you don't have to buy it because it's free, and it's readily available on the web as a PDF or as ebook versions. You can buy a version from this A Libris UK if you really need to do it, or you can just get it and print it yourself on your printer at home to spell a lot of dead trees. It's the this 2018 version that you can buy printed. It's 250 pages, but if you get the PDF version, it'll be many more pages. I think it's 330 something. All right, back to my little thing. It actually didn't work now either. So, I mean, it didn't work. It worked when it shouldn't work, or something. I think, yeah, again, it's because it is because I'm finding the system lib. No, it isn't. Why? Annoying. And as you can see about that book, so I wrote it, or I actually, it's not done, as everything never really gets done for real, so it'll continue to be maintained. So if you buy the book in print, it'll be the version from roughly a year ago. No, I mean, it hasn't moved that much since then. But if you go to you can go, for example, to the GitHub repository for the book, and here's all the this is the entire book. All the stuff is written in Markdown, and you can go to this summary here, and that's the pretty much the table of contents for the entire book. So you can, if you find mistakes or want to write a new chapter or want to do something, you can go there. Verbose, for example, that I mentioned, it looks like this, reading it on GitHub. And GitHub displays Markdown in lines, so you can actually read a book like this if you want to. Yeah, I have a Wikipedia page. It's doesn't say much, but I have one. Actually, I have one in Swedish and in English, apparently. Yeah, so, and I mean, it's not, if you buy a hard copy of the book, you don't actually, you pay the self cost. We don't actually overcharge anything, so because it's, I mean, you're paying 20 something euros anyway, 25 euros maybe, so you don't actually support anyone much anyway. So you get it in print if you want it in print, if you want to like read it offline and you think paper is a good thing for you to read a book. But exactly, the contents is going to be updated and it's going to move. So the book, I'm sure the book will be fine. The contents is going to be the most of the contents for several years going forward, because it won't change that fast. But I mean, fast forward a few years, I'm sure that the book will deviate more and more from the online contents. But then again, everything technical will, right? So if you have a programming book of anything, it'll go the same destiny, meet the same destiny. So this didn't work out as easy as I figured it would. Why does it find the wrong options? There are several of them. I better change them all. So there's also the open. Oh, I bet this is. Yeah. I'll change them all and let's see if that changes anything. Or even better, I'll just remove everything there. There. Now there's nothing, no lib directory at all. Will that make anything different? This is not a very important bug either, since we actually do check for that header file. So enabled, still enabled. Yeah, and now we run into this problem that I was talking about earlier. So now we have a system OpenSSL. Well, I have a system OpenSSL because this is a Debian Linux. So yeah, if I have a OpenSSL installation already. What did I do now? Oh no! Oh, oops. So now it'll just fail to find it in this directory that I pass on to configure, but in my configure test it'll still find OpenSSL, so it'll still succeed. Blah. Yeah, I wrote curl, or I'm not sure. The past tense is the correct thing, since I think I'm actually just now proving that I am actually still creating curl. I'm not sure exactly if I'm creating it, but I'm writing it or patching it and fixing it and extending it. And I want to emphasize that I didn't do this alone, right? So I started the curl project. I might, well, I am probably the lead developer of it, but there are a lot of other developers too. So we have more than 600 authors in Git so far. We have over 1900 contributors in the thanks file. So this is not my personal project. So I'm going to maybe I'll try out, but I'll revert out my crappy attempts that didn't do anything good, and then I'm going to look at his suggested, might not be a he, but the user's suggested fix. Yeah, I guess this user didn't have a system installed. Yeah, maybe. And he put that on where? Random seed immediately above this. All right, I didn't show the right window, but it doesn't matter. So this is the fix he suggests. If we asked for something with SSL flag and it wasn't enabled, this won't catch my case because it will still be enabled. But that's good, right? That's what we want to do. Rebuild the configure script. And this it's annoying to test for me. So if I run it again, then if I do this, it'll work anyway. So I'm just gonna make sure that it doesn't actually complain. But was given, but OpenSSL could not be detected. Was given. English. With SSL was given, but English could not. With SSL was given, but OpenSSL could not be detected. Okay, that's crystal clear. Or not. It's not gonna. It's never crystal clear. Users will always find another meaning in whatever I write in an error message anyway. But okay, it's pretty clear. to me. Yeah, so if you have any particular questions on curl or internals or bugs or pull requests or I guess in protocols or internet stuff as well, so just throw it out. As you can see, I don't have any major important thing to work on right now anyway, so I'm just dabbling around with the things. So feel free to add something to the agenda. I'm going to just do a pull request with this user's suggested fix and say that this might be a step forward. That's his name. So I'll just create a new branch. I create all my, since I create this branch in the regular repo, I prefix all my branches with bagger because that's my username on GitHub. So configure detect open SSL. I can't type, of course. Detect open missing OpenSSL and based it on master and this, so suggested by configure error if error out if OpenSSL wasn't detected when asked for. If with SSL is used and configure still couldn't. Oh well, what is a git commit style? So git allows us to do whatever style we want. It's just a message. But in the curl project we have, or it's not. I mean, we have a style or a follow a style, and so this follows the style pretty much. Which the style is the first word on the first line is roughly the area or the source code or the function or something, the area where the change is done, and then there's a short message describing the change. This should be a short line and nothing else, and then should be an empty line and then the longer description here. So the longer here we can basically write an entire saga if we want to, but it should of course then rather explain why a change is made and not exactly what the change is sometimes, because a change could be displayed in the actual change of the code, right? But the reasoning is not always apparent. So here we can write everything, the longer description, and then we provide anything by colon when we give credit to other users than those actually writing it. So I always try to make sure that I preserve the authorship of a patch. So if we get a patch from someone, I'll make sure that the author is still the same author, and I only commit it, and I'm not the author. And if I'm writing it like this, I make sure that I give credit to the correct user, because in the end, then I'll show you another little script that I have that then will later collect all these lines, so that this user will end up in the credits properly and eventually in the thanks file. So this user will be one of those 1900 users who have helped out, because they wrote a bug report or suggested a fix or whatever. If with SSL is used and configure still couldn't enable SSL, this creates an error instead of just silently ignoring the fact. Fixes 3824. That also goes. This is a GitHub thing. So if it says fixes, it'll close this issue when this PR is merged. So this is the basic little PR, and I'll push it to GitHub like that. Boom. And in the browser it'll appear in the pull request, so I can just make it a pull request and I can label it for the build, and boom, off it goes. And then of course it'll run all the CI things. It'll take a while, and then speaking of CI things, you can go back and see my URL API thing that's resolved. Yeah, you can see here that a few of the builds are now green. So we have a bunch of Windows builds have gone green, Solaris build green, FreeBSD builds. For some reason, one of the FreeBSD builds are always slower than the other ones. So they're green. So that's a good sign. As I've said before, the Travis ones are the most picky ones, and they're the ones most likely to actually fail. So at least some of them. There are 31 different ones, so they'll take a while longer. As you can see, in this top one took 43 minutes. So, and there are 31 of them. So, yep, it'll take a while longer. Okay, that's the pull request. So I did it the very simplest way, the way the reporter suggested it. We have this fun report. So we have a broken link in the install file, which it links to a Microsoft knowledge base document, which apparently is gone, and very annoying, but what can you do? So the knowledge base article is removed, but as Jay says here, he has some outdated info. So I'll just sounds good to me. And I'm not a Windows guy anyway, so I don't really build with this. So I have a bit of a vague awareness of what it actually means. Yes, it gets harder to iterate on some solutions when there's a lot of testing, but it also makes it easier to iterate. Since, I mean, sure, if I just fix a quick bug and I want to merge it, it'll take me hours to just get the CIs through and everything. So I can't just fix it up and merge it in 20 minutes and be happy with it. It'll take, I guess, on average, maybe 12, 16 hours until all the CIs tests are done. So, but that's not really a big problem because I don't have to move that fast, because I can just move on to the next PR. So I can have 3, 4, 5, 10 different ones in parallel, so it doesn't matter that much. And I think with a lot of tests and a lot of infrastructure for testing things and verification, and it's a comfort level when I want to change something. It's very comforting to know that we have 1,000 tests that verify that most things are still working. So if I go in and fix some internals, and sure, I'll just move around functions, and I found some shortcuts and better ways to do things. when I can rerun all those tests on all these platforms and they're all green and 100% tests are through, I can be fairly sure that I didn't break anything. So no users are going to be unhappy with it. So in that way, it makes it faster to move on, because when I do a huge refactoring of code and all the tests are still working, I'm pretty sort of sure of myself and the code, so I can move on. So yeah, it's. But then, of course, changing things internally can sometimes be a matter of updating a lot of test cases, and that's also less fun. But I think having a lot of tests is still better and still wins in the long run. Of course, we have I mean, curl runs on basically anything that is 32-bit and has roughly a POSIX API. So you can build it on pretty much anything operating system-wise. So, and of course, we don't test curl on all of those platforms. So there's tiny risk that we're actually breaking something on some platforms that we don't actually test on. But the good part there is that most code in curl is totally platform independent, so it's going to look exactly the same. So once we have tested it on 5 platforms, we can be fairly sure that it actually works also on the other 12 or 45. Well, I'm talking about refactoring code, when I don't change the external behavior, just fix the internals, like improve things internally and not change how things work externally, because we have an API, we have an ABI that we don't break, so of course they will continue to work exactly as we have promised. So, and we can refactor a lot of stuff without breaking APIs and ABIs. So I have if you in the I have down here I have a quick, where is it? I have a quick branch down here. Here, the quick in HTTP3. So that is coming. And if you can see my little checklist on top, so you can actually build curl with 2 of the quick libraries. They don't actually work. I mean, it doesn't actually do exactly what you want it to do, or because that's still work on outstanding. So sure, I mean, I'm keeping track of quick and HTTP3, the specifications and everything. So, and I'm keeping track of the 2 of the libraries there that I plan to use. One being the Quiche library from Cloudflare, and the other being the ngTCP2 library. So you can actually build this branch with either one. So both ngTCP2 and the Quiche. So my plan is to come back to this branch again and continue to work. The quick and the HTTP3 work has been moving along pretty fast. I mean, they're moving a lot and a lot of changes all the time. So just trying to keep up with their development has turned out to be pretty annoying. So if I leave this branch for a few weeks or a month and come back to it, they've changed the APIs in these libraries because they changed the specifications for both quick and HTTP3 in the meantime. So just maintaining this branch has been a lot of just keeping up with the changes in the libraries that they do to keep up with the changes in the specifications. Yeah, but it's not that hard to support many libraries, and I don't have to support many libraries. It's not a value in itself, but I already have a history with these libraries, and I started out working just with the TCP2 ngTCP2 library, because ngTCP2 is written by the guys who do the ngHTTP2 library, and I had a good track record with that library and them working on that library, so I figured that would be a good choice. But it's also pretty quirky and complicated, and when I started, they didn't have an HTTP3 component either, so it was only quick. And then the Cloudflare guys came and sent in a patch and said, hey, we made it work with quiche. So, okay, fun. So then I just remodeled the work a little bit, so I support both the quiche and ngTCP2. And in back when I got the patch for quiche, they made it work with quiche, so you could actually do a transfer like this example down here. It actually did work with Cloudflare back in the day when I got it, but it then used HTTP 1.1 over quick, which wasn't standard in any way, but they just proved the quick layers to work and to do HTTP 1.1 over that. But since then, the quiche library have implemented HTTP 3, and I think the ngTCP2 guys have an H3 component as well. So I should be able to move on with this branch soon, maybe. I feel a little bit. I mean, it's a lot of work to keep it all up, so I have to leave it hanging a little bit at sometimes. So I'll get back to this. I think this should be fairly easy to rebase and get it back up to speed again. The hardest part here is that ngTCP2 has changed again, I think, so there's going to be work on making sure that, and I don't think I ever actually got it to completely do a quick connection based. So there's work to do. In ngTCP2, they made it, I can tell you a lot about the quick internals and stuff, but quick, the protocol and the specification, that they use TLS in a new way that TLS has never been used before, basically. Instead of sending records over the wire, you send TLS messages. And when you do it over TCP, you only send records. So the libraries, they only basically, the TLS libraries of this day and age, so I mean, they've existed for a while, right? SSL came in 98, 96, whatever it was. And yeah, so the libraries have existed for a while, and they do TLS messages. No, they do TLS records. And but Quick wants TLS messages, so these libraries need a new API. One API to export and use messages instead of records, which no library had before Quick. And they need more APIs for some of the secrets for the encryptions that none of the libraries had before either. So none of the traditional libraries work unmodified. So there's no support for OpenSSL, for example. But and so ngTCP2, they decided to do their library SSL library agnostic, so you could be able to plug in any library, which made it really complicated because I need to then write that adoption layer myself, which is complicated, and I don't really know all that quick TLS encryption magic, so it's difficult. And I mean, it's not impossible, it's just made it more work for me, which made me hesitate a little bit. I'm not sure exactly what to do about it. But in the quiche case, they did the opposite approach. They rely on a single SSL library, namely Boring SSL, and Boring SSL has the necessary APIs already, so they can do Quick with Boring SSL already. So going with quiche is definitely the easier approach to get Quick going in HTTP3, but relying on Boring SSL is of course not a solution for the future. We can't make curl rely on Boring SSL because none of the Linux distros do that and so on. So we need to make sure that it works with other libraries going forward. So a bit of an icky state. I'll get back to that soon. I think the HTTP3 layer is improving. The HTTP3 specification and the interop between the different implementations. They're doing an interop next week, I think, on the quick drafts 20 and HTTP3 draft 20. So things are looking good there too. So I should get back to that. I have some other work that I think I'm going to get back to it, maybe in my next stream or something, because I have another work. Yeah, and in curl we support basically every TLS library you can think of, and a few more that you didn't know existed. So we have support for, I believe it's 13 different TLS libraries. But in general, that's not a big problem, but at least I need something as big as HTTP3. I want that support to be done on with the big mainstream TLS libraries, so that we can actually ship it at some point to, I mean, in Linux distributions and those regular builds. I'm sure it'll be interesting to make it work with, for example, S-channel, the Windows native API and stuff like that. Right, but OpenSSL is not GPL compatible, that's true. But curl is not GPL, so for us it's not a big problem. It is a problem for some. But it also, we ask in our annual user survey, we ask users what TLS backend they use, and OpenSSL is by far the most popular TLS library people use curl with. So OpenSSL is the de facto standard for curl. We of course also support GNU TLS and NSS and Wolf SSL and Polar SSL and all sorts of SSL and TLS. Yeah, so that was 2 hours basically of streaming. I've been yapping a lot. I didn't do a lot of things. I at least fixed the URL API thing. That was the primary one I wanted to fix. Right, I can just do this. I haven't done this in a while. I tend to... I'll just make sure that I'm updated. I tend to update my release notes every once in a while, maybe once a week or so that it is synced with what has happened in Git recently. And because if this file, the release notes, that's the release notes for the pending release, and if you go to the website, it is in on this file, pending release notes for the upcoming release. So this file or this web page on the site, it is automatically converted from that release notes files in the Git repository. So that's when I wanted to why I want to update it every now and then, so that this list is decent, so you can actually see here what is coming in the next release. So that is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to sync it, and then I have a little helper script here. Let's see that, not that much. So this is what I do then. I'll just add entries for this bug. I ignore, and I'll we removed the Mesa link builds, but updated, because now we're updated instead of removed, and then they're in some of the commits are not immediately any bug fixes, so I'll just leave them not mentioned in the release notes. And I tend to link to the bug fix so that you can actually, so on the web page, for example, if you go to this, you can actually, all of these links here, they're mostly to the bug report for that particular fix. Like for this SMT fix compiler warning, you can click it and you'll end up on the particular, in this case, a pull request for this compiler warning. Okay, so mark bundle blah blah. I fixed that. That was the big the fix I did on the previous stream. We fixed the null deref in an out of memory situation in the cookie code. We have better error message in NSS. Oh right, we updated the... Oh, this is cool. I added code to provide to enforce a maximum string length that curl accepts. So when you pass a string to libcurl now, it'll only accept strings up to 8 megabytes in size, which might sound a bit ridiculous, but it saves us from so many problems. If you can provide ridiculously long strings, that has mostly opened us for various kinds of bugs in the past. So thanks to this, we can actually avoid a few of those. What if you pass in a 2 gigabyte string and you take the string length and multiply it by 2, because then it'll wrap on a 32-bit architecture and blah blah blah. And this way we fix that problem once and for all. Some of these changes are of course just changes along the way, and not changes that have sort of having a public exposure, but some of them are. So I just want to mention bugs that actually are fixing something that was released in a public release, not just something that was fixed in during development. Bug fixes on documentation, that's good stuff. And there are actually the links to the GitHub issues via this bouncer script, just for tradition, so that we can actually, if we ever move the bug system to somewhere else, it could actually be updated and redirect to the new ones. Oh yes, bug bounty. We introduced the bug bounty just, what's that, a week ago or so. So that's documentation updated in this pending release. So far I would say that the bug bounty is actually sort of a success, because we have gotten a bunch of reports. Many of them, I would say, I'm not sure ridiculous is a word to use. Would probably insult those who filed them. But I would say that a bunch of the reports we get have been on things that our bug bounty doesn't cover, like infrastructure things. Our wiki is world editable. Yes, that is on purpose, and we have gotten that reported I think 3 times by now. Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier on, when that Reddit post was got a lot of attention on my Twitch stream. Okay, so I added a bunch of changes we've done, and then I have this little script. Contributors since 664.1. This is the GitHub, the Git tag. So I'm running the script. So contributors since that tag. Here's a list of people that have contributed. So these are, it checks the Git authors, committers, and all those names that are mentioned in Git commit messages, blah blah blah, colon, and then a name. And it'll collect all these, sort them, and put them out for that. So as you can see, when I updated last time, it was 24 contributors, and now it's 32 contributors. So bam, I just do like this, and we're on 32 contributors for this release, counted since 7.64.1, which was I have another script that was actually 36.1 days ago, since I made the tag. So yeah, we have commit authors, 8 new commit authors in this release, 26 so far in this release. So pretty good. So how do you hack? No, well, yeah, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Curl is a tool and a library, and someone has to write the tool and the library. And I happen to do that quite a lot. So that's the release notes. So, and if I do diff then on the release notes, I sort the changes so that they will group up nicely. So that's why the changes are spread out like this. And you can see these, I usually get the text here from the first line of the commit message. So I just copy and paste from the commit messages. So if the commit messages are just fine, follow our style, I can just get the first line and put it in like this. That's how I do it, and then I commit it, and when it comes to the release notes, I just call it synced. And I do that just, and when I call it synced, I can use my convenience git command, git latest, because that checks for where is it? The latest one. It checks for a log since the previous synced thing. Very special Git magic to make that happen, but cool still. And then I can push my release notes, update, boom. And it'll appear in Git. Yeah, I mean, you know where the Git is, so we can see it here in the, if we go and see the commit messages on GitHub, they're there. That's the sync. That's my removed prototypes from before, and my previous, I merged the Mesalink build earlier, blah blah blah, and that's the, here are the mine pipe weight fixes from the other day. How do I? Yeah, that's a good question. I say GIF, but then I'm not a native English speaker, so I guess I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm the one to ask. It doesn't matter how to pronounce it. You should just type it instead, and then you can avoid saying it. So I think I'm done for now. I'm going to head out in the afternoon and do a presentation about DNS over HTTPS and get yelled at for that. So that'll be fun. I'm going to be back again tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. my time. The same time as today. Is going to be shorter tomorrow because of other stuff to do as well. But I'll be back. And if you have questions or things to bring up or bugs to fix, 5 bugs, 5 pull requests, and we can do them live on the stream or whatever. Otherwise, I will dig up some other work because I have more work pending. I have some fun work that I haven't mentioned yet that I can bring up tomorrow. So, bye for now and curl safely, everyone. Bye.